We're happy to be joined tonight by Dennis Dodd from CBSSports.com. Dennis, thank you for taking some time to talk with us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
There are a lot of issues facing the NCAA these days, a lot of discussion about various things, paying players and those sorts of things. You have a series I want to start with of articles and stories right now on CBSSports.com looking at the concussion issue, in particular Adrian Arrington, a former athlete from Eastern Illinois. For people that haven't seen it, can you take us through that story and kind of that issue that you're exploring right now?
Well, basically, he and three other athletes from small colleges have sued the NCAA over negligence in treating concussions and head trauma. Their contention is that the NCAA won't admit that it's their duty of care to take care of these students. If you look at the NCAA recommendations in their medical handbook, the association won't even go that far. So when they get injured, and they have been injured with concussions, they're saying that it's the NCAA's duty to take care of them then and after they get out of school as well. In the case of Adrian Arrington, who's the lead plaintiff, he was a defensive back for Eastern Illinois and suffered a series of concussions to the point that he now has seizures and can't work because of those seizures. He has a torn rotator cuff in one of his shoulders because of the violence of the seizures, and he's on welfare for $300 or $430 a month with three children. So he is a very sympathetic figure. The latest news is that the Arrington's attorney and the NCAA may get into settlement talks, which would kind of cap the reach of this. But again, even if that case is settled, it won't be the first one, the next one filed against the NCAA.
And here locally, John Calipari has talked a lot over the last several years about change in the NCAA. Maybe teams need to break away or something needs to happen. Do you think, because of this issue as well as the lawsuit ongoing, that we are heading towards a completely different college athletics entity, whether it's the NCAA or something similar in the near future? Is that what this is heading toward?
In the near future, I'd say no. In the long term, I would say yes. I mean, you see the pieces falling in place for a breakaway. You saw the commissioners speak out last month at their various media days against the NCAA governance structure. I think the NCAA, along with the membership, is going to have to, remodel itself. In what shape, I don't know. But I think eventually the big business of sports will become too big. That these BCS schools, I guess the 60 or so that are in these five main conferences, will have so much of the money and they have so much of a desire to keep their interests the same that they will go out. There'll be some network or station or somewhere that'll pay them a bunch of money to televise their games only, and they won't have to share any of it or any of the voting privileges with some of the schools below that Mendoza line, I call it, the MACs, the Sun Belts, the Conference USA, Mountain West. I think that is the play, maybe 10, 15 years down the line. But for now, I think it's going to stay really conservative. We talk about the Johnny Manziel case. Should players, be able to make money for their autographs? I don't think the commissioners are in any kind of mood to go there because I think that chips away at the amateur model right now. But I think down the line, I think they may have to consider that.
And you've written about the Manziel case. I want to talk about that. Is there a possibility that he does not play this season? How real is the possibility do you think that is? And could he ultimately be the catalyst that kind of changed that dialogue?
I think there's a possibility. I think, there's a best case scenario and worst case. Worst case is he doesn't play this year. His career's over because I don't think he's going to stick around. Best case is he's reinstated. I think in the middle you've got this situation where he might be suspended and then have to pay back a certain amount of money if it's found, that indeed he did get money for these autographs. Now, that would assume that he didn't lie to the NCAA. There's a document all these players have to sign in early October when they come back to camp that says, I'm not aware of any NCAA violations. Well, did he sign that and did he say that? That's another story right now. But I think probably something in the middle because if he's gone for the year, you're probably going to see some kind of injunction or lawsuit from his lawyer. If nothing's done, then you're going to have claims of whitewash. The critics will say, oh, the SEC orchestrated this or the NCAA was laying down. I think that the sweet spot might be some sort of suspension, and a betting man would say 2 games suspension. He comes back for the Alabama game.
Well, we look at the SEC, and Kentucky has a schedule where they will play 4 straight top 10 teams, 5 top 10 teams overall. We're looking at that. Alabama is clearly, I guess, the head of the conference right now. Overall, SEC, how good is Alabama compared to everybody else? And maybe how good is the conference compared to the rest of the country?
Well, they're pretty good. Bob Stoops kind of portrayed it for me in the offseason. If you remember his comments about propaganda about the SEC being so good, well, what he really was saying is raising that age-old question: do you want, one or two dominant teams at the top, or do you want parity throughout your league? Well, in the case of the SEC, they have about 5 or 6 teams that are really good at the top. The Big 12 doesn't. They're in a state of parity right now. They're not going to have any national championship contenders. I would submit they may not have a top 10 team this year. So, what do you want from your conference? Do you want that overall good competition, or do you want one or two at the top going for a championship? And I think clearly the answer is you want the SEC right now. You want to contend for championships because everybody has bad teams at the bottom. It's just a question of who has the worst bad teams. The SEC might have had that when Vanderbilt was bad. I don't know. I don't think anybody cares right now. The problem is, not the problem, the advantage is that they've got 6 teams right at the top, any one of which we wouldn't be a bit surprised won a national championship this year.
When you look at Kentucky as a whole, there are a lot of questions in terms of recruiting, what this program could do. Do you buy the thought that UK can be a nationally relevant program in football?
Yeah, sure. They were for a time under Hal Mumme. They have been in the past. Rich Brooks brought them back. I don't think there's any question they can. I mean, I think they can be a team that wins 8 or 9 games if they hit it just right. The question is, do they have to sustain? Can they sustain it for a long period of time? That's the problem in a basketball school. The same problem Kansas faces. There's only a handful of schools at basketball schools that are good at both. So I don't think there's any question. I think Mark Stoops has got the energy. The recruiting was great, borderline great. He's energized the fan base. The season tickets are at record levels. So, I think he's got the easy stuff now. Now he just has to win on the field in the toughest league in the country.
The other side of that, Louisville, down the street, we've seen them kind of the same thing with Charlie Strong. Started with the recruiting, got into Florida, got some guys. Are you buying them this year, though, as a legitimate national title contender?
I think there's a dark horse, and here's how it can happen. Look, everybody knows, I think, their schedule's an issue. They don't play a team in the top 39 receiving votes in the coaches poll. That's going to hurt them. But if they do go undefeated in the New American, it's not even as good as the old Big East. But if they do go undefeated, I think that gives them credibility. Then people are going to have to start talking about that Florida game last year. And boy, these guys are really good, even though they proved it. It's almost like they proved it in reverse by beating Florida last year. And then everybody has to lose a game. And then things have to fall out. I think a bunch of teams would finish ahead of them with 1 loss. But if they go undefeated, and Louisville does have a legacy, I think they've got a chance to do some things here. We're not talking about Boise State coming out of nowhere. Louisville is an established program. Then I think they do have a chance. Then it's just up to the computers and the voters to vote them that high if everyone else has a loss.